Laythe is easily one of the coolest places to land in KSP, but exploring it usually forces a choice: hop from island to island with the aircraft or drive across the coastline with a rover. So why not do both? In this video, we're deploying a custom drone with a fully functioning rover underneath. Now, starting off, we will get these little mini fuel tanks right here. Once we get those little mini fuel tanks, what we'll do is put them all together so they look like a 3x3 grid, just like that. Now, what we will be doing is adding these solar panels, which we will end up changing later. Now that we are done with that, it is now time for us to grab 4 cubic struts, these little guys right here, as they will be for the engine. Then we will add these little octagonal struts right here, also for the engine. As you can see, I decided to make them a bit smaller as they were a bit too big for the engine and it looked a little wonky. Now what we will do is we will now add the engines to the craft. Now that we have done that, it is now time for us to replace the solar panels with that little grid I was talking about earlier. As you can see right here, this is another reason why tweak scale is great, because you can do little things like that. But what we are going to do is we are going to add the solar panels to the craft and then put them on a slight angle. Now it is time for the bigger solar panels. We added 6 of them. Now it is time for us to add some batteries to the craft. We got these little 2 right here, and we're going to touch up their location by making them go inside the craft a little bit. And then the next step for us is to get some gyros, so when we are flying through the atmosphere on Laythe, it is easier to control. We will also add even more batteries because we will need them to go island hopping on Laythe's surface. Now it is time for us to do the landing legs. Now it is time to get the fuel cells. These will help fuel the batteries for longer journeys across Laythe's islands. So basically what they do is take the fuel out of the fuel tanks and convert that into electricity for the batteries. Now it is time for us to actually test the aircraft, so we will set the torque limiter to 100%. I didn't show it, but in the VAB, I connected the torque limiter to the main throttle. And then what we will do is we will set the deploy angle to 5 degrees for all of the propellers. And would you look at that? It seems like we have liftoff. Now this thing actually controls fairly well. Now as you can see on the bottom of the screen, I forgot to record building the rover. So I'm sorry about that, but as you can see it controls really well. But one of the main things we will have to work on is where to put the landing legs and how we're going to configure it so that the drone can still land and whatnot while having the rover docked underneath it. Now, as you can see, these lights at the bottom here and at the front are doing amazing. These are exactly what we need for night missions on Laythe for when we want to explore the atmosphere and the surface at night time. Now, what we are going to do is try for a landing. Now, as you can see, this is actually quite the annoying thing to control. It is quite difficult to land at the moment only because I am not used to it, but I'm sure as we get used to the craft and how it controls, we will only get better at landing it. Alright, so here we are, almost making a landing. That was kind of rough, but that is okay. So, what we can do now is undock it, but it won't really work because, well, our landing legs, they're too short. Now we are back in the vehicle assembly building, and what we will add is a remote guidance unit for things like retrograde and prograde to add. But what we will do now is we will get rid of the legs and we will get these little rectangular struts, and then we will put them on all 4 corners and we are going to angle them outwards. So basically what's going to happen is they're going to be angled outwards on like a 45-degree angle, and then we're going to put our landing legs on these struts. So basically it'll kind of look like a spider in a way, which is going to be pretty cool. So as you can see here, we're kind of at the halfway point, which I reckon looks pretty cool. I don't know if you guys find it ridiculous, but I think this looks pretty cool. And then what we will do is we will add the landing legs, but even later we will then add some more changes to this. Now it is later, and as you can see, we are getting closer to the final result. I reckon this thing looks pretty awesome. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, I'm looking how my spider drone rover is looking. I gotta say, this is something unique that I've never seen anyone do, so yeah, I'm happy with how this is turning out so far. Well, I gotta say, I already like how this looks already. It looks much better than the other demo that we had earlier, and it looks kinda cool being a drone spider. So yeah, here we are flying. It is much easier now that we have retrograde and prograde. I imagine it'll be much easier to land and whatnot as well. And here we are, getting ready for our first attempted landing. Now I can already tell this is going to go much better than earlier. So we will put it on radial out, so we are going straight up and down. And then we are going to try and slowly change our surface speed, so we are going nice and slow. So as you can see right there, it was already working much better. But as you can see, I'm still getting used to the throttle. I'm still not sure how much to add, but as you can see, we just got a smooth butter landing. It is now time for us to do some little adjustments. As you can see right here, I am deciding to just make sure that we 100% will have enough coverage when it comes to landing on Laythe, and so that if we land on things like uneven surfaces, it'll work fine. It is now time for us to move on to the actual building of the ships. As you can see there, we got our decouplers and our little adapter. And then we will move on to our heat shield. So we got this big boy right here, he will be plenty. And then moving on, we will also get the shroud. So when we go to launch into the atmosphere, our craft does not burn up into 100 pieces. Now, the next step for us is we need to get our fuel tanks done and organized. Now that we have got those two, we will make them nice and orange, and then we will get our coupling. Once our coupling is out of the way, we will then move on to our bigger fuel tanks for the bottom of our ship. We will then add a quad adapter to the bottom so we can have 4 engines at the bottom, as that will help us get the initial push out of the atmosphere. Now we will get 4 ailerons to help control the ship in the atmosphere, and we will also get a couple RCS thrusters to help assist us in the atmosphere as well. We will get some hydraulic detachment manifolds for our solid rocket boosters. Now there's not too much more to the ship besides the little things that I'm doing right now on the screen, so I will just skip forwards and show you guys the final result. Well, here we are at the launch pad. The ship has been made and we are ready to launch. Here we go. Now we are going through the atmosphere right now. As you can see, our throttle is just a little bit below halfway, which is where it should be, as we want to use our boosters on the side of our craft to push us through the thicker parts of the atmosphere. We are now in the thinner atmosphere, higher up in the sky, so shortly we will be able to decrease our main throttle and let our boosters do all of the work. Our boosters have now run out of juice, so it is time to separate them from the main craft. Once they have separated from a good distance, we are now ready to take off and go even faster. We have now increased our apoapsis heights to about 80,000 meters or 80 kilometers. So now we will be ready to get a maneuver node sorted to go and get into an orbit. Alright, well here we are in the map, ready to set up our orbit with our maneuver node. So as you can see there, they're both about 80,000 meters, so that makes us ready to go. And we are now in a nice stable orbit around Kerbin. Now it is time for us to launch our next ship. But before we do that, we will need to deploy our solar panels to ensure this one does not run out of power while we get our next ship organized. Alright, all the next ship really is just a satellite. So we have connection to Kerbin from our rover and drone on Laythe. So let's do that now. I don't want to bore you guys, so I'll speed up time and just show the whole thing in about 30 seconds. Alright, well there's the final result. I hope you guys enjoyed the little Lego thing. Alright, so there was my little montage or whatever you want to call it. Here we are getting into another orbit around Kerbin. And then what our next plan after this is to actually set up our intercept to reach Jool. Now that we have completed our burn, it is now time to officially set up our intercept. So we will drag our prograde marker all the way out, set Jool as our focus, and mess around until we get a nice intercept. Now that we have finalized our intercept on the other craft, we have now switched over to the next craft and we are now doing the same thing. Now that it has been completed, it is now time for us to begin our burn for both of our crafts. Both the ships have now completed their burns, so it is now time for us to begin our journey to Jool. On our way to Jool, it is important to set up a maneuver node to about halfway to make it so our intercept to Jool is at a reasonable distance and a reasonable orbit around the planet. Once done with both transfer nodes, it is then time to actually begin our proper journey to Jool. It is now time to properly make sure our orbit is nice and straight and that we are in a reasonable orbit around Jool. Once you have done that, it is then time to do it with the other craft. I know, how fun. Now what we need to do is set up a maneuver node to actually enter Jool's atmosphere, as its drag will help us slow down and get into an orbit without using any fuel whatsoever. Now it is time for us to actually begin our aero burn into Jool's atmosphere. So, I may or may not have known how hot Jool's atmosphere was, and I thought it was just like Kerbin's, where you could kind of sit at the edge of the atmosphere and you would be fine. But the ship almost burnt up, so I did a bit of a sneaky and I turned down the heat damage in the cheat menu. Sorry. The aero burn is almost completed, so it is now time to switch over to the next ship and do the same thing. Now it is time to make sure that nothing is going to fly off when we enter the atmosphere, so we're going to retract these solar panels and hope for the best. Now that the aero burn / aero braking maneuver has been completed for this satellite, it is time to put it in a decent orbit around Jool. And there we go. It is now successfully in a nice stable orbit. Alright, what we're going to do next is we're going to put our satellite into an orbit around Laythe itself. As you can see right now, I am just messing around with the prograde and retrograde markers until I get a decent intercept with Laythe. Once we have gotten that intercept, we are then going to mess around with it a bit more to get the intercept nice and close. We're going to do a polar orbit, so instead of going prograde in our orbit, we will be going up and down from North Pole to South Pole. We have now officially completed the intercept burn, and now it's time to actually put ourselves into a proper orbit. We're going to speed up time and get ourselves into our maneuver node and put ourselves into a high polar orbit. So as you can see right there, we are sitting at a good 500,000 meters, and then we are going to burn at our apoapsis and make the other side 500,000 meters also. Once done with that, we will then switch over to our other aircraft and make sure that everything is all good for the Aero Rover. Now what we will do is we will do something very similar to before, so we will mess around with the prograde and retrograde markers until we put ourselves into a decent intercept with Laythe. If we have sped up time and gotten to our maneuver node, we will then complete our burn. Now as you can see, I am just making sure that we will not crash into the planet at 100 million miles an hour and that we will actually get into a decent orbit around Laythe. Well, here we are. As you can see, we're on the home stretch. We are getting very close to landing on the surface of Laythe and actually letting the rover and drone do their thing. So as you can see right now, we are just organizing the orbit, making sure it is nice and even. Now that the orbit has been finalized, it is now time to actually land on Laythe. So here we are messing around with our prograde and retrograde markers. As you can see, we're going to land on that little red cross right there. As you can see, I decided to land on these group of islands right there because you can just see that they're kind of close together and it shouldn't be too much of a worry for my drone. And even if it is, we can use the fuel cells to assist us in traveling long distances. Now, one of the very last steps for us is to decouple everything and expand our heat shield. And as you can see, as our trajectories mod is calculating the atmosphere, we are only just going to make it onto the surface. And as you can see, we have now entered the atmosphere of Laythe, and all we can do now is just wait. Alright, well here we are. We have officially survived the couple minutes of hell. 7 minutes of hell is what they call it on Mars, I believe. But yeah, here we are. As you can see, I'm pressing A and D to hopefully spin this upside down temporarily so it does not explode. Just like that. Alright, and here we are, 17,000 meters above Laythe's oceans. As you can see, it is quite difficult to control due to the thinner atmosphere that we are in right now. As we descend, it'll become easier to steer and control as the air will be thicker. Alright, and here we are going in for the actual main landing on Laythe. Now this drone is actually quite controllable due to the similar atmosphere that it has with Kerbin, but the lower gravity. This is really easy to control, which is good. As you see, we're just going on radial out, so we'll make sure that this is going to work. Make sure it's nice and soft. We're on a bit of an angle, which is okay because we have these long, nice legs. And here we are, we have touchdown just like that. As you can see, that was absolute butter and it worked flawlessly. Now the last and final step is to detach the rover from our beloved drone. Now unfortunately for our rover to charge, it needs to be connected to the drone, but that is okay. Now as you can see, we are going to control it. Make sure nothing breaks, and look at that, there we go. We have a working drone and rover on Laythe. Well, here we are getting ready to try and connect our rover back to the drone. Well, we can only see how it goes. We can increase the docking force. Oh, and it tipped over. But that is okay, that is why we have quick saves, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, we are back in the sky due to magical reasons. Thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe.